Hi, welcome back to 5 is Prime. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to simplify fractions, and even more so, I'm going to explain to you what you're doing and why it works. So, first things first, simplifying fractions. So this is when you reduce the fraction to use the smallest numbers possible. So we want to take our fraction and use the smallest numerator and the smallest denominator. So to solve that, I've got 8/10, and I have to ask myself, okay, is there a number that I can divide 8 and 10 by? In this case, yes. So if the answer is yes, that means that it can be simplified. So 8 and 10 can both be divided by 2, and then I can just solve. So 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my fraction, 8/10, in the simplest form is 4/5. What you're doing here, because I find a lot of the time we don't explain what we're actually doing. What we're doing here, I've got a model down here, and my model right now represents 8/10. What you're doing when you're simplifying is basically taking out some of these lines. So I've got 10 sections here, and I reduced my fraction to have 5 sections. I reduced it to 4/5. So if I erase every other one here, I will show you that the fraction itself, the value that the fraction is, has not changed. It is just the numbers that we're using. So if you looked before, I had 8/10 here. Fast forwarding to remove those, I still have 8/10. It's just represented as 4/5. So that's pretty much what you're doing when you're simplifying. I've got another example down here, so 6/8. What can I divide 6 and 8 by? It is 2, so 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. If I come over to my model here, I've got to scoot my highlighting up just a little bit. Oh my goodness. And I can erase some of these lines. And now if we take a look, I have 1, 2, 3 out of 4, 3/4. My shaded part has not changed, just how many sections I have total has changed. Okay, here's 2 examples, so you can hit pause, try to figure out what you can divide 10 and 15 by, and do that division, get your simplified answer, and also 18 and 20. Go ahead and solve those on your own, and then come back and check your work with mine. All right, so 10 and 15, I know that both those numbers are divisible by 5. So I can divide 10 by 5, and I get 2, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. So 10/15 in the simplest form is 2/3. And then over here I've got 18/20. So I can divide both of those by 2. And I get 18 divided by 2 is 9, and 20 divided by 2 is 10. 9 and 10 are next door numbers on the number line, so I know that I can't simplify that fraction any more than it already is. All right, so that's simplifying fractions. When you get into more advanced fractions, you also may come across something that looks like this. So this is called an improper fraction. Improper fractions are those fractions where the numerator is larger than the denominator. So in this case, we still need to simplify these, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. Our final answer is going to look a little bit different. So I have 5/2. I've already modeled this out for us. I have 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2. I've got 5/2 down here. And then I've got these empty models up here. And these empty models are just, each one of these represents one whole. So what we're doing when we take an improper fraction, we're putting it in a mixed number when we simplify that. So the first thing I have my students do is ask themselves, how many groups of 2 can I take out of 5? And if you count by 2s, you do 2, 4, and then you can't have another group because you go to 6. So I have 2 groups, and if I take 2 groups of 2 out of 5, so if I take 4 out of 5, what am I left with? And I'm left with 1 and then I'm just going to use the same denominator. So 2 and 1/2. That is our improper fraction in a mixed number. That's our simplified fraction. I always like to show a model to show my students what we're actually doing here. So I'm going to show you what we're doing. So if I have 5 halves down here, I know that I can take a half and a half, and I can make one whole. And I've got enough to make a second whole. I can fill in another model. Now this last one sitting here, I'm going to drag it over and place it in there, and then I can count up how many I've got. So I've got 1/2 and 1/2, which makes 1, plus another 1/2 and 1/2, which makes 1, plus my 1/2 left over. I can combine these two into 2 and then tag my 1/2 on there, and we've got the same answer. What you're doing is you're taking your fraction pieces and bundling them into wholes and then seeing what you have left. And I've got one more example down here. For this example, we're going to use 8/3. I've got 8 1/3 down here already. And the first question I need to ask myself is, how many groups of 3 can I take out of 8? I know that 3 times 1 equals 3. I know that 3 times 2 equals 6. And I know that 3 times 3 equals 9. My 6 is the closest to 8 without going over. So I know I can take 2 groups of 3 out of 8. And I'm left with 2/3. Now I'm going to show you how to do this on the model down here. So we said that we were able to take 2 whole groups of 3 out of 8. So if I'm checking my work with a model, I should be able to fill in 2 of these rectangles over here fully with my 1/3 pieces down below. Okay. Then I said I had 2/3 left over, which it looks like I've got 2/3 left over down here. I'm going to drag them up into my model. And now I've got 1, 2 wholes plus an extra 2/3. That is my 8/3 put into a mixed number. That's a simplified version. All right, I've got some examples to try down here. So go ahead and pause, try it on your own, come back. If you want to use a model, you totally can, or maybe you want to try it on your own with a different strategy. Okay, so my first question, I'm going to look at this 10/4. I know I can take 2 groups of 4 out of 10. I always like to kind of subtract it up here. 2 groups of 4 is 8, so I'm going to subtract 8 from my 10. And I've got 2/4 left. Now you might have seen your 2/4 and you saw that you could divide both those by 2, and 2 and 1/2 is our very best answer we could get for that one. All right, our next one, 12/5. I can take 2 groups of 5 out of 12. 2 groups of 5 is 10, so I'm really just subtracting 10/5 from that. And I'm left with 12 minus 10 is 2. Using my same denominator, 2/5 is going to be my simplified fraction. And over here I've got 15/12. So I know I can take one group of 12 out of that, and I'm going to be left with 3/12. And this is kind of like that first problem. I can also simplify this a little bit further. 3/12 can be divided by 3. So I'm going to get 1, and 1/4 is my final answer. And there you have it. That is how you reduce fractions into their simplest form and convert improper fractions into mixed numbers. I hope that this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.